So one of the big things that we added was new deadlock tracking. And Steve, do you want to go over kind of how we're doing that deadlock tracking that should
Well,
go on through every instance?
let me start with why we're doing it, and then we'll go on to the how. So with Database Health Monitor, we're really trying to be the entire monitoring tool that we need for everything that our clients and Database Health Monitor users would ever come across with SQL Server.
Mhm.
And a couple of weeks ago, I was on a mentoring call with one of our clients, a relatively new client, and we had some deadlock issues, and we didn't have the right reporting in Database Health Monitor to just completely pinpoint and show them what was going on. So then we came back for our next mentoring session, and they said, "Oh, we downloaded this competitor's product and tried it out, and it was perfect. It showed us everything we needed to know about deadlocks. It showed us where the problem was." Well, at that point, I realized that we were missing a significant piece there. And what really got me going was, well, they tried a competitor's product, which is always kind of tricky. And we want to make sure that you don't need a competitor's product. So rather than going and looking at that competitor's product and just doing a copy or whatever, because that's kind of tacky, what I did was I went and investigated and looked into what are all the things we can do with deadlock reporting. When you get a deadlock on your SQL Server, what are all the best ways that we can report on that? And we came up with, I think, 5 or 6 different deadlock reports that show different perspectives on this.
Yeah, so we
So
have 6 new deadlock reports, and they're spread across both the instance and database level.
yeah, so why don't we start at the instance level and take a look at one of those deadlock reports?
Yeah, let's just start with deadlocks.
So this one is just listing all the deadlocks that have occurred on the SQL Server. And here, this is a test server, and I created some deadlocks on purpose just to be able to track this. And this is just reverse chronological order from the top down of the most recent deadlocks going back in time. And if we double click on one of those, we can get more details about specifically what was happening. Now, one of the things we should explain before we go too far here is what is a deadlock? Now, we have locking and blocking that we've reported on for a long time in Database Health Monitor. And what that is it's one query is jamming up another query for some amount of time, and then they eventually clear and go through. But what a deadlock is a deadlock is a situation where one query is waiting on another query, and that other query is waiting on the original query. And whatever happens, there's no way that they're going to clear. Meaning it's sort of like two people have got it trying to get into the same parking spot, and neither one's willing to give up. So with this, you can see in this example here, one transaction is updating table A and setting some things and then waiting for a delay, and the other one, and then updating table B. And the other transaction is doing the opposite order of updating table B and then updating table A. So that gets set in a situation where the transaction on the left is waiting for table B to be available, and the transaction on the right is waiting for table A to be available. And that's never going to happen because they're stuck waiting on each other. So what SQL Server does is it says, okay, we've detected there's a deadlock here that will never resolve itself. So we're going to cancel one of them. We're going to terminate one of them. And the terminology around that is a deadlock victim. And if you've ever run a query, SQL Server might throw out an error message that in a deadlock situation that says, you've been chosen as the deadlock victim. Now, the way they phrase that, chosen, sounds like kind of an exciting thing, but it's not good. It basically says whatever was happening with your transaction was completely aborted and rolled back, so the winner transaction can go through. With a deadlock, SQL Server decides, well, it's better to have one transaction succeed than to fail both of them. There's a lot of different strategy around preventing and reducing deadlocks. We're not going to go into that today. Today, we're just going to show how do we find them. So in this case, from this dialog, the deadlock advisor, we can see the problem here is between table A and table B on this database that's called Deadlock Test DB. And I think there was a database called Big Stuff that was just a test database that had similar tables I was testing against, and we'll see some other deadlocks on that. But we can see down at the bottom what host name the blocking was coming from. We can see what application, in this case, it was coming from Management Studio. They're both in read committed mode, and you can see the session ID and the transaction counts there as well. So pretty much everything you need to do to figure out what's going on with this deadlock, how to track it down. And next is you have to figure out how to fix it, which could be a whole nother hour-long podcast.
Right. And you also mentioned We also classify the victim and the winner in the advisor, so you can keep an eye out on which one actually went through and which one canceled if you didn't catch that in Management Studio.
Yep. And with that, the thing is that this is the winner and the victim this time. But if this deadlocks again in 10 minutes, you might get a completely different order depending on who got there first as to which one is the winner. We're not always going to see the same one as the winner.
Right.